A couple of years ago, Ford decided to shake things up in our lives and launched an SUV, an electric SUV that too, with a nameplate that we thought would never fit it. They called it the Mustang Mach-E, and they swore, absolutely swore, that this car will have the same performance as the original. Well, we have them both in the metal here on tarmac. There's only one way to find out. Let's launch them to 100 and see which one is quicker. Let's go. 3, 2, 1, go!
But that's for later, because first we need to set the premise. This isn't just a car comparison, this is a question a lot of people are asking themselves right now. Should you buy something you love or something that makes sense? So, whether you're genuinely choosing between these two, or you just want to know if Ford's electric Mustang is real or just a very good marketing exercise, then stay with us. By the end of it, you'll know exactly where you stand.
Firstly, let's talk numbers. You can have the Mustang GT for about 250,000 dirhams here in the UAE, whereas the Mach-E is currently priced from 274,000 dirhams. So not much of a trade-off if you're looking for something in favor of practicality. Although they're both Mustangs, they're both in two different categories. This is a quintessential muscle car. It's got the same buff design that we are all familiar with and we've all, or most of us, have fallen in love with. The other is an electric crossover, a family car. Now, even though they share the same design language, the Mach-E looks a lot more buffer. Think of how Sylvester Stallone looked like in Rocky 1 versus Rocky 6.
You'll notice a lot of common design traits like the triple bar LED headlamps, a fastback roofline, and an overall muscular stance. And weirdly enough, when you look at the dimensions, aside from the height and the ground clearance, the Mustang GT is actually larger than its practical family-friendly sibling. But that's where the similarities end. The two-door Mustang has all the traits that have made American muscle cars so iconic. The functional vents carved into the long hood, the aggressive intakes down below, and quad exhaust tips at the rear that announces its presence from miles away. And in a rare moment of softness, the side mirror throws a galloping pony onto the tarmac as you walk up to it at night. Everything here serves the same single idea, and that is drama. The Mach-E adds more beef to the metal, larger 20-inch wheels against the GT's 19s, and a couple of doors in the rear. And Ford doesn't stop there either. Where the GT clings to tradition, the Mach-E quietly deletes it, like the door handles. Instead, Ford has given a small button that releases the door. Up front, instead of a thumping engine, what you will find is additional storage. It's not too large, just enough to store 130 liters of cargo. And that's the Mach-E in a sentence. Same pony, but new priorities. So, which one do you think treats you better once you're behind the wheel? For that, we'd first have to step into the two-door. Here, the first thought that comes into mind is how driver-focused the whole cabin is.
The steering wheel sits large in your hand and the seats, which are made of leather, do a really good job holding you in place around corners or when you're holding a drift line. Speaking of which, the Mustang is one of the rare cars on the market today that still gives you a physical handbrake. But flip to the other end and in the infotainment system, you'll be able to find a quiet start mode too. In other words, it gets both sides of you. That leads us to the infotainment system.
Ahead of the driver is a large curved screen that splits into two. A 12.4-inch digital cluster and a 13.2-inch touchscreen running Ford's Sync 4 OS. Then there's a 12-speaker Bang & Olufsen system that fills the cabin and a couple of power outlets. Everything in here is built to prioritize the driver more than anything else in the car.
Whereas the Mach-E flips the script entirely. Firstly, you have a 15.5-inch portrait-oriented display that can give you access to all the controls. You can even play games in here.
Beyond that, you get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, an immersive 10-speaker Bang & Olufsen system built right into the dash, and a wireless charging pad up front. For a full picture, here's how the Mach-E's major features stack up against a two-door GT. Feel free to pause this video to have a clearer view of these lists. Because there's no transmission tunnel running through the floor, storage appears everywhere, even beneath that floating center console. The cabin is airy thanks to panoramic roof, and the seats are genuinely comfortable to settle into. The back seats have ample leg and headroom for a 6-foot adult to stretch out. And then there's a 402-liter boot, expandable up to 1,420, which is clearly big enough for a proper family. Every choice in here points to the fact that this car was built to be lived in, rather than just be driven.
So clearly this car is aimed at the family. But Ford says that just because you have a family, it doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice on performance. So now it's time for us to see how true that is.
Behind the wheel of the GT, the 5.0 V8 Coyote engine does what it's born to do. It talks to you, it vibrates through the seat, you downshift just to hear it respond. Power delivery is old school and honest. Even with independent rear suspension, it is still a handful to manage. The ride is stiff, the engine's got real muscle, and on a straight line, it's an absolute beast. And oh, the noise!
Mach-E feels completely different when you're behind the wheel. The acceleration is instant, and because of the all-wheel drive system, you can confidently chuck it around a corner at any speed and come out of it unscathed. If you want to be technical about it, the Mach-E can do the 0 to 100 sprint in under 4 seconds, whereas the OG Mustang is claimed to do it within 4 to 5 seconds.
When we put them side by side, the Mach-E was quicker off the line and hit 0 to 100 km/h in 3.91 seconds with launch control active. Under the same setting, the GT did it in 4.87 seconds. So clearly, the electric one is quicker by nearly a full second. And yet, the slower car still manages to make your heart race.
When you're driving the Mach-E and you put your foot down, it feels very rapid, it feels very, very quick. But if you do the same thing in the OG Mustang, feel like, oh my gosh, it's trying to kill me. But speed and excitement aren't the same thing. The Mach-E is very, very impressive, no doubt about it. But the OG Mustang is more involving. This one makes you go faster, but the other, it evokes some emotions that this car cannot reproduce.
So how do they live here? In the UAE, everything changes once you add 45-degree heat, a speed camera every 200 meters, and basement parking, which the GT was never designed for. The V8's fuel cost is a real number you'll have to consider. The Mach-E, meanwhile, is claimed to do 419 real-world kilometers. It charges from 10 to 80% in about 37 minutes with a 150 kilowatt DC fast charger, or fully in just under 10 hours with a 10.5 kilowatt AC charger. Against its rivals, it's the same story for both. The Mustang GT is one of the only few American muscle cars still standing today, and nothing in its price range has this much character. The Mach-E has a tougher fight, but it wins in terms of looks and the fact that Ford took their time to optimize the batteries and the air conditioning so that it works just as well here as it does in the West. And sure, both have flaws. The GT's backseat aren't for humans, and the Mach-E carries the weight of a name it never asked for.
Now, having said that, even Ford was quite skeptical about giving their first all-electric car the Mustang name. In fact, it took a lot of convincing from the team before Bill Ford, the great-grandson of Henry Ford, to give it the green light, with one of the sole reasons being that the performance of this car is truly worthy to carry on the heritage. And throughout the course of this video, we've seen that it is true to a great degree. But the thing is, I have been a die-hard fan of the Mustang ever since I first sat in it in 2008. Because among the sea of American muscle cars, the Mustang has managed to carve out its own identity. And over the course of those many years, it's arguably become the king of muscle cars. And I see a lot of those traits with the Mach-E, because in the new modern era, this is an EV with an identity. Well, I've talked a lot about the soul of the Mustang throughout the course of this video, and the only way to find that out is by experiencing it from behind the wheel. And one of the best ways to do that is from renting it from the self-drive app. Now, if I was to summarize these two cars in a sentence, it would be that this is classic American muscle, whereas this is conscious evolution. Well, we have a lot more exciting content lined up, so make sure that you subscribe to the AutoDrive channel. And the best way to keep track of all our content would be to follow us on our social media channels. Well, until we see you next time, this is Philip signing off. You've been watching AutoDrive, powered by Self-Drive.